Turned Inside Out, a mescaline and LSD report by Ivan Ankovenich on erowid.org in 2011. About me. In high school, I habitually smoked marijuana, frequently consumed opiates, and tripped a few dozen times on whatever was available, usually LSD, mushrooms, or MDMA. Looking back, I buried my grief, self-loathing, and anger with heavy drug use. I used psychedelic drugs as an escape from my feelings rather than as powerful tools for self-improvement. My attitude has since changed. At the end of high school, with the aid of my family and some encouragement from the state, I went to treatment, and I remained sober for nearly 4 years. During this time, I obtained a BS in chemistry. I am now working towards a PhD. As time progressed, I questioned whether I could responsibly use drugs. I started drinking moderately, and occasionally using marijuana, LSD, and mescaline. It has been 2 years since I made the decision to use again, and things seem to be under control. I only mention this here because I feel it is important to understand the background of a person who is reporting a trip. The setting. Over the course of the summer, I tripped half a dozen times on mescaline, with amounts that varied from 200 to 450 milligrams. In short, I was well acquainted with my new chemical friend by the time I took this trip. In the last week of summer, I went to a concert and I brought with me 2 400mg doses of mescaline. My buddy Jay was at the previous night's show, during which he took some LSD. He was camped out with about 30 people, most of whom were complete strangers to me. I don't usually trip at concerts or take multiple drugs at once. Nevertheless, Jay and I each took some LSD and mescaline before the show. Note, only the drugs mentioned in this report were consumed. The trip. 6 p.m. 2 hours before the show, Jay and I each took about 100 micrograms of some liquid LSD that had been well tested throughout the summer by our friends. T plus 20 minutes. I began to notice the effects of the acid. It was nothing more than a mild euphoria and an increase in energy. T plus 35 minutes. The trees were gently swirling and waving to me. I could tell that I had taken enough acid to have a mild trip. It was then that Jay and I decided to consume some mescaline. We each took 200 milligrams to start. T plus 1 hour. As planned, we each consumed another 200 milligrams of mescaline. At this point, I was in an odd place, halfway between tripping on acid and coming up on mescaline. I was tense and anxious, but at the same time very much intrigued by the ground and trees. Communication was easy, but I was altogether uninterested in talking. T plus 1.75 hours. We went into the venue to find our places. Jay had a seat in a different area than me, so I sat with another friend, Kay. I was still stuck in limbo between 2 trips, but the tenseness of the mescaline started to subside. Minor patterns began to flow through the sky, and everything was rippling with rainbows. T plus 2.25 to 3.5 hours. Wow. 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 The show began. The music was explosive, but filled me with a peace I've never experienced before. I literally sat down in the middle of a crowded venue and meditated. Occasionally, a caring stranger would tap on my shoulder and make sure I was okay, to which I would give them a reassuring smile. This period of time was pure bliss. My nerves rippled with energy. Looking out over the crowd, I saw an infinite pattern of rainbows from which dancing aliens would emerge. The closed-eye visuals were too intense to handle or to describe. I was quite lucid during this time. When the set ended, Kay and I went to the restroom. T plus 3.5 to 5 hours. Kay and I found some new seats way in the back where I could sit down. He pulled out a bowl and took one hit. Things really got moving after that. My mind began to unravel. All of existence began to unravel, and everything that ever happened came forth in one moment. It all made perfect sense. If I really tried, I could tell you where I was. My visions were out of control. Everything became part of a galactic conversation taking place in my brain. My life, freedom, individuality, and identity were held in front of a light for the world to examine. I was engaged in full-on telepathy with everyone around me. A battle was formed and I was in the middle of it. Half the world despised me, and I was tortured with their persecutory thoughts. The other half supported my right to exist, my right to be an individual, and to explore the universe in my own unique way. My drug use, sexuality, life story, and spirituality were all exposed, and hotly debated amongst the crowd. In effect, I was turned inside out. Of course, this was all way too much to handle. I wouldn't say I was having a bad trip, but I don't want to understate how difficult such a position can be. T plus 5 to 6 hours. By now, I was thoroughly confused, and I had no idea which side of the conversation I was on anymore. I tried to profess this to Kay, but I was truly unable to communicate in words what was occurring. Moreover, the whole exercise seemed pointless, as I already believed I was telepathically communicating with him and everything else in the universe. To me, the entire universe was in a state of metamorphosis. Its true nature was beginning to unfold. Everything began to slam together into one cosmic entity whose synthesis had been perfectly calculated eons ago. I had discovered the formula that began this change. I was the catalyst. The phrase, solving the world upside down, continually passed through my brain. My thoughts really made no sense. Words and phrases were jumbled and took on new symbolic meanings. I desperately wanted someone to tell me what to do, how to change my life, to be a better person, and to find God. Was I God? Are we all God? Is this new cosmic entity God? I told Kay I had to go, and I took off running. I assumed he understood what I was talking about, but I found out later he was quite worried. I ran through the crowds. When I arrived at the gates, I panicked. What to do? I passed the first gate and found myself stuck between the security at the first gate and the guy collecting trash a few 100 feet away. I paced back and forth for a while and then bolted past the trash collector. I spent the remainder of the concert wandering around the parking lot, trying to find someone to help me. I talked to several groups of people. They were all very kind and tried to figure out what it was I needed help with. One young woman tried dancing with me and kept asking if I could smile for her. Another group of people told me that I should be a good person, respect others, and find brotherhood. The cosmic struggle continued despite everyone's best effort to help. T plus 6 hours. Jay and Kay found me after the show wandering the parking lot. They asked me where I'd been. I told them I had discovered the formula to all of existence and that I needed help figuring out what to do with my life. They tried to get me to explain more, but eventually, when I got distraught that they didn't understand, they just gave me a Valium. T plus 6 to 12 hours. The Valium calmed me down. I reconnected with reality, and the cosmic struggle business subsided over the course of an hour. I was still tripping pretty hard and well into the night, but it was peaceful and enjoyable. I went to bed around 6 a.m. I don't recall whether I slept or not. It is worth noting that Jay also had an intense experience that in his own words was the hardest he'd ever tripped, but that's his story to tell. Retrospective summary. In retrospect, it was an irresponsible and foolish decision to take LSD and mescaline in a concert setting. It is clear to me that these drugs have a cumulative effect greater than either alone. This combination is definitely in the big leagues of ego dissolution, introspection, and transformation. It has been 5 months since these events transpired, and I now regard this trip as one of the most important events in my life. Looking back, it is clear to me that the cosmic struggle I experienced was the result of some major dissatisfaction in my life. Central to this was my lack of belief in anything spiritual. Actually, I had never even recognised that the desire to be spiritual was present inside of me. I am now open to all things spiritual. This is an ongoing project. On another note, I smoked pot twice in the first few months following this experience, and I ended up getting paranoid delusions that resembled this trip. In both instances, these delusions ended once the pot wore off. Nevertheless, it has made me think twice about my ability to use psychedelic drugs. For a while, I feared I was becoming a schizophrenic, but things have since cooled. I have no desire to trip again any time in the near future. Just thinking about this trip gets me quite agitated. Nonetheless, I still feel that this was a worthwhile experience. Something was missing in my life, and I now know what that was. This trip really focused my desire to be a better person, and I feel that drive has not yet faded. Many trips that are perceived as bad are just what happen when one finally confronts the shit that's been bothering them. Yeah, it's frightening and confusing, but if you accept the challenge, it can be incredibly rewarding. To the strangers in the parking lot, thank you for your kindness. I bared my soul before you, and you all showed me love. A rare event indeed.